Welcome to the Unlocked Podcast. We're three business owners from across the entire globe, also partially just America and the 51st state of Canada. We are discussing things and our experiences that are happening while we are actively running and owning and operating businesses in the locksmith and security industry. That's why we called it Unlocked, because it is a behind the scenes of the business operations that we are currently undergoing right now. We're sharing those stories with you. Lots of feedback from our listeners explaining and asking questions as to the topics that we can discuss. And today, actually, Tony is going to introduce the topic that he was given by one of our 7 listeners. Right? We've increased our listener count.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. Almost
7 listeners now. So he is going to introduce the topic and what it means and what we're going to be discussing today. So I'm going to toss it over to, by the way, before we do that, my name's Chad Lingefeld.
I'm Tony Hokinson.
I am the ever so polite Lars Johnson up here in Canada, and I am just ecstatic for Tony's introduction to tell us about this topic. What do we got today,
Yes.
Tony?
So
Tell me.
unintentional pun here, but how to break into a new market. So you guys have, I believe, expanded beyond your normal geography of Charlotte and Alberta.
Okay, so you're talking about geographical markets,
yes,
not
yes,
okay.
yes.
I thought it was market segments.
Nope. How
See,
to
I was
break into a
confused about
new
that too.
geographic market. So
I spent hours preparing for new market segments.
you've never prepared for anything in your life.
I'm just glad that we were able to convince Tony to come back for a second episode, because that was really a challenge
There
for
was
us
no
on the last
convincing.
episode.
There was just lack of communication. You know, for a guy whose mantra is prior planning prevents poor performance, you really don't live up to that.
I was prepared for 2 episodes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Chad mostly likes that for the alliteration.
Yeah.
And
The sound is fine.
I was
sounds
prepared
good. It's
for
very
2
marketable.
episodes today. Yeah. I even brought my jacket just in case.
Yeah.
That is a very nice looking jacket, Chad.
It fits me well. I mean, it's
Important
sized
on a
perfectly.
podcast.
It
You
is.
know, you want to make sure you look good, because that's what the people notice.
As you changed your shirt between episode recordings.
I might have spilled
You can't
coffee
say
on my
that when you
previous
went and
shirt.
changed your clothes as well.
I may have spilled
I
coffee.
may have spilled coffee on my other shirt. No, joke's on you guys. Dummies. So we're talking about geographic expansion. And I'd say it's probably the more the more easily conceived notion. I mean, if you're slinging doorknobs in one spot, you can sling doorknobs in another spot. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of limitations and there's a lot of challenges that come with that. I know we've got, God, I got to be accurate with this or Tony will kill me.
Yeah, he will.
We have got,
Or at least pepper you with a bunch of questions.
yes, we've got a store in Edmonton, Alberta, which is a couple hours north of us.
Is that still Canada?
Yeah, how much farther north can you go?
It's
I'm joking. I know that's Canada. I'm not. I have a better sense of geography than you.
than me.
Yes.
Ooh.
Wow,
You don't even know where Charlotte is.
Yeah, that's where Chad is.
Yeah.
Down there by the.
It's the plane lands here. It's pretty easy.
Oh, and you know,
And our airport is amazing right now, by the way.
Oh, I can believe it. I'm looking forward to it.
Somebody told me the other day, they came to visit and they said, their airport is amazing. The construction is just fantastic. And I was like, yeah.
So I flew in there I came to visit you, and you fly in on Delta, and it's a whole new experience. There's no construction. It is actually gorgeous. You fly in an American, and it's like you're.
Look, we're not sponsored by any
I was
airlines.
going to say, Delta, if you're listening.
If we fly in on Delta, you come in on the roof. That's impressive.
Oh man,
It is a totally different experience.
It is. You're gonna want to take the seatbelt sign pretty serious on Delta.
They just drop you off right off on the runway. You don't even have to make it all the way to the jetway.
Yeah. Sully was flying that one, I think.
Yeah. Anyways, getting to a new market.
Yeah, getting to a new market. So we have our store a couple hours north in Edmonton. It's just after the abyss, the end of the flat earth there. You fall off the cliff and land in Edmonton. We also have
Three
one
Moose.
past the Moose. We have one in Strathmore, which is another small little town. And then we have a handful in Calgary. And, we were looking at ways to expand just our market share. And the opportunity came in our industry. There's a lot of opportunity for acquisition. And I know we've had a previous episode talking about acquisition versus organic growth.
Yep.
But we in our the three of us being at the stages of our career there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of people that are looking to retire and looking for someone to take on their legacy of their business. And that's really the way we've looked at it. I mean, there's lots of areas, there's a lot of business brokers out there that'll that market these businesses. It seems to be a common default in my area where these people that are looking to retire will approach a broker and they'll help facilitate the deal. And then there's just that word of mouth. I use our channel pretty actively. I talk to our suppliers. If anyone's looking to sell, give them us a call. I even talk to people at conferences, and we're ready for those conversations whenever you are. I know our first one, I was talking to the fella for a few years. It was probably 2 or 3 years before he finally called and was like, "Yeah, I think we're there." So, that I think is just a little bit of background of how we got to where we are. I know, Chad, Tony, you've got a whole bunch. I don't really understand because the U.S. is basically one just big city.
Yeah, it is.
You call them different names and different colors and stuff, but
I'm intrigued. So I want to specifically focus on breaking into a new geographic market. So for us, we have not done that. So I'm intrigued by this because I want to do this eventually.
Is Bloomington, Minneapolis, that's not different?
I mean, they're 10 minutes apart. That's.
Oh, okay. So you mean new more than 10 minutes? Okay.
Yeah, like breaking into a market that is more than 2 hours away from you, like going into somewhere that you are not currently operating, and how do you grow in that area? Yep. So you have how many? You said 2 or 3 extra locations that you're like.
Yeah, we would have 3 different cities.
Okay, and Chad, how many different geographies do you operate in?
We are in 3 as well.
And
so we're in Charlotte.
First, just so we're clear.
But he did it better.
We're kind of 3.5 ish. Ish. We're headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then our first major acquisition outside of our market was Anderson, South Carolina, which is about 2.5 hours southwest of us, very close to the Georgia state line. If you're paying attention on geography. And then the next big acquisition was in Charleston, South Carolina, which is over on the East Coast near the coastline, obviously. And so that is about 3 hours away from Charlotte. And then it's maybe 4 hours away from Anderson. So if you can imagine kind of a triangle with those 3 locations.
So why did you choose
3 points?
You guys
triangle.
both.
Okay, I get it.
All of those were acquisitions. None of them were greenfield.
Correct. So we tried to do a greenfield in Greenville, North Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina, and it was a challenge. And I've talked about this before. I would probably try it again in the future because now I know what failed, but it was a big challenge to do greenfield because of the way that we went about it. But one of the big things that I learned through breaking into a new market territory, because I had this theory that we're in Charlotte, we have systematic processes and we have customer service and we have got this thing, right? And so my original concept
How hard
was
could it be?
Correct. Yeah. I had this original concept that it would just be like we'd have a call center that would handle customer service and, sales and all that stuff. And when we did the acquisition in Anderson, I learned within, I think, the first 6 to 7 days that the theory that I had was not going to translate into that market because it was very localized. And so, I think you can try to look at other large businesses that have expanded and the ones that have worked well with centralized, call centers or whatever. And when you're trying to build customer relationships, which is what we are in the business of, if you're supporting property managers, facility managers, all that, then you're managing relationships. And it was so funny because this city of Anderson, South Carolina is a very tight-knit, close city.
What's the population? Just for context here.
No clue. I could Google it, but
like a few 100,000.
Yes, it's very small, and it's next to a college. There's 2 colleges in that, so it's very college focused. There's Anderson University and a small little college called Clemson University. You may have heard of them before. They're right beside of each other.
29,000 people. That's it.
20 in Anderson, yeah, but it resources. It's right beside of Greenville, which is a growing population, and Clemson, which is a large population, and so. It was 29,000 people. It's a tight knit community, and the first thing that kind of happened whenever we were doing the conversion and transition of everything, is that the customers would come in and they would say, "Oh, you're from up in Charlotte. Well, that's the big city," and so the mentality was a very negative connotation around Charlotte, and now somebody from Charlotte had come into this city, and so we had to adjust very rapidly to get localized representation in Anderson to be able to create those relationships, because the calls customers did not want to speak with someone in Charlotte, and they could tell the difference.
Yes. I would guess the accent might give it away. But
so
even that close,
and we, you guys pick on me for being for my southern accent, but
that's one of the reasons. Yeah,
Anderson and Greenville and that location down there, and even Charleston, right? It starts to become completely, 2 hours away. It becomes a completely different southern drawl.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so
how do they say vehicle?
Oh my God.
So anyways, they don't. They call it a truck. Anyways, so they were able to pick that up very quickly, and they said they don't want to talk to somebody in Charlotte. They want to talk to somebody in
I don't blame them. Yeah, that's fair. That's really interesting, because our experience is the opposite. So we have a very heated rivalry, I would say, with this will shock you being Canadians, but our hockey teams, between our northern store and our southern store. And noticing that and kind of playing off that, our brand, so all of our companies have a shield on it. It's a sign of protection. It's the shield, but the shields are different colors depending on what store. We're all a city name, lock and safe, right? That's all the different brands. Well, our Edmonton brand is orange and dark blue, which is the color of the NHL team in that city, right? And all of our vans. Yeah, but they're all of our vans are wrapped like the city, the sports team in the city. So we haven't experienced that over the phone. We have our call hub. What I'll say is all in Calgary.
Is there a distinct difference between the dialect in Edmonton versus Calgary?
No, but definitely the attitude. Edmonton's a lot more blue collar. Calgary's a lot more white collar. So it is different, and but I've never actually heard of that, of people.
That's a good way to describe the difference between Charlotte and Anderson as well. White collar versus blue collar would probably be more of that context. Which, by the way, I went to my first hockey game the other week. I've never been to a hockey game in my entire life.
We noticed
until
the
weekend.
Well, by the way you call it hockey, that's part of the problem. But that looked like quite the experience for you. But I noticed
it was kind of cold. They should turn the heat on in the place, but
oh man, sometimes it is just so painful to admit that I am your friend. Oh my God.
Okay, so you mentioned something there that I think is valuable. You have your call center in one place, Lars.
Yeah,
you've expanded to multiple territories. We just did an episode on customer support, customer service. You have your call center in one place. Chad, do you do that as well for Anderson? Or
we're localized.
You have localized.
Yeah, we're localized at every branch.
Purely because of the dialect thing, or do you have other reasons that you did that?
Just local presence. Okay. So we do the same thing for our Charleston store as well. And we don't have a full out customer service team at each location, but we do have a customer service representation at each location.
Do they back each other up then?
Correct. Yeah, it rolls over into Charlotte for backup, but the first point of contact is at that local branch.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it's really interesting. I haven't noticed that. But I mean, sorry,
I was gonna say we don't have stores in different geographies, but we have run into that with one of our stores locally here, where not having local representation on site to talk to the technicians and go over that, we're switching that strategy up and moving, or hiring somebody to move to have a local customer support rep on site. So I like that.
Mm-hmm. So Tony, I know this, remind me, this topic came specifically from Michael Hansen.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And refresh my memory. What was he specifically talking about?
Believe it or not, I did not ask a lot of questions.
Whoa!
But my takeaway was how to do it. How to do it. And this is I'm kind of trying to ask you a series of questions here of basically greenfield versus organic versus acquisition. When to do it, why to do it. Just kind of all about that.
Okay. So I guess I can speak to our experience of, I'm just going to use Edmonton. The other ones were smaller acquisitions. Edmonton was a few $1 million in revenue, had about 8 to 10 members on that team. An established brand, has been around for 40 years. So it was in a pretty reputable company, right? It was not a small acquisition. This is one of the major, probably 3 or 4 companies in the market. So I found out through one of our reps that they were looking to exit and retire. So we went through the negotiation phase and figured out what it would be worth. There was a building involved in that transaction as well,
right.
Which was our first acquisition of a building.
I was going to say, did you intentionally want to go to Edmonton, or was it because this opportunity presented itself?
Well, we were looking for growth. I think I'm always looking for growth. And when the right opportunity arises, so Edmonton specifically, no, but it's the other major city in our state, without getting into different states, different tax, different, just a lot of other things. So Edmonton specifically, so, we found the opportunity. We figured out a price that was going to work. We knew that they were exiting. We kept things very quiet because we wanted, one of the only major things, part of that deal was we wanted to control the narrative of when to talk to the staff about it.
Right.
So we wanted to be present as part of that. We put together a bit of a transition team, went up to Edmonton specifically as a group, introduced ourselves. When it comes to acquiring a business, the first thing everyone thinks of is, what does this mean for my job?
Yep.
Right.
Am I getting fired? Right. We were Calgary. Our Calgary location is about 4 or 5 times the size of Edmonton. So, immediately they're starting to think like, okay, this is a big company. They're going to screw everything up. All those common fears, and just kind of had those conversations ahead of time. So, kind of went through like the top FAQs of your fears and just laid it out. So that was kind of our approach. I think that one went reasonably well. We've had a few that haven't gone that well. But how we're able to manage it, and I think this is crucial, was, before we decided to go up there, we wanted to find someone, and I know, Chad, this is how the approach you've taken too. So we wanted to find someone that was part of our group to move to that location. So Mason is one of our Calgary guys. He's, I'm good friends with his dad. We just have the same kind of mindset. And I said, if you're looking for an opportunity,
I've met Mason. He's far nicer than you. I wouldn't diss him like that and say he have the same mindset as you.
Thankfully, we can just edit you out there. But we, talked to Mason just about opportunity and said, hey man, like we're going to need somebody to go up there and run this branch. It's going to be an opportunity for you financially. It's going to be an opportunity for you to, take on a leadership role in the company. Is this something you're interested in? And so we discussed it, and he said, yeah. And, he basically packed up his truck and moved up to Edmonton, because that was someone that could really lead the cultural change, because we were going from a fairly small type of what I will call traditional locksmith company where, it was a husband and wife that effectively ran the operations. And then, they had a couple staff that had been working there for, 25 years. So we wanted to make sure we didn't go in there and just, slam the door on the old culture and say, you're now our culture, because one thing that can go wrong, and one thing that's a pretty standard mistake when you're going through an acquisition, is you assume everything you do is right and everything they're doing has to be changed to match you. And it turns out a lot of the times we go there, and I was just offsite with my management team the last 3 days, and we were talking about the things that Edmonton, the smaller branch, does better than Calgary. Mm-hmm. How do we act more like Edmonton? So that was it was a big learning point. I wanted a point of contact to run the cultural aspect of it, and someone I knew and trusted that could be there and run point, but also had a lot of dialogue about how they're doing things and why, so we could take some the best from them and us. Yeah.
During that absolutely. Transition, how present were you in that, or was it strictly Mason? And what is the reasoning behind that?
Early on, I was up there for probably a couple of weeks, maybe a week on, week off. It is only I think it's 2.5 hour drive. So I wanted to be there to, kind of provide the vision and the explanation mm-hmm. of why this made sense and this was good for everyone. But also didn't want to be so involved that people were looking at me as that, right. Source of truth, or being the boss, or whatever you want to call it, and made sure Mason was, front and center. And, here's Mason. He's the guy that's going to be in charge.
Yeah.
Right. So that was it. And now, largely I meet with Mason at least once a week, usually a few times a week, and we chat. Also, I think maybe a crucial part was, what I'm going to just refer to as a cultural champion. So there's a lady, our senior manager of accounting and finance. She does accounting and finance for all the different branches, but she's been with Edmonton Lock and Safe for, I think, 35 years.
Wow.
So, it helps that she's a really sweet lady, but I was also pretty intentional. I wanted to, kind of befriend her, and I wanted to have some communication with her, because I knew if she was on board, the transition would go just that much easier, because I felt that she was kind of the key personality of the group. So, getting her on board and communicating a lot with her and making sure she understood where I was coming from, and I could understand, why they did some of the things they did, and then integrated her into our culture. And, she helped me understand their culture, because that really made it easier, where Mason was kind of like a transplant.
Yeah.
That I know is going to take longer to, kind of come to fruition. She was kind of my champion on their side to say, okay, these guys aren't all bad, right? And kind of worked with us for that transition.
So your strategy
was kind of my
was
strategy.
Find a champion in your company, find a champion in their company, merge them together.
Yeah, more or less. That's one way to look at it. It takes a while to find that person. Mm-hmm. She's a little more reserved, and so she didn't just outright jump at it. So it took a few weeks and months, I would say, before I really understood mm-hmm. that was it. So just kind of asked around and talked around and figured out who was going to be that glue piece. And that's going to be critically important for wherever you're going, because being in a new geographical location that is far enough away, you can't just pop in there. And that makes it harder when you're going through situations, because you just can't get the emotion of the room. You can't right. get context. It's a lot harder. So finding that champion and really kind of forging that relationship was I feel was pretty crucial on it. So.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Now, Chad, you specifically, I know you had, with the Anderson situation as well, because you guys, you started off by, didn't you dispatch everyone from Charlotte down there to start? Or was that a different one? I get them mixed up.
Yes. So Anderson, when we did the acquisition, there was a small operation, and it was mostly in-store service. They didn't have any outside service.
Retail.
It was mostly retail.
Really?
Yeah. So we had already positioned a couple of technicians that were in Greenville, South Carolina, which was about 25, 30 minutes away. So the first thing was to merge all of that together, get them centrally located. So we had the, I guess, benefit that we had 50% of the folks that were already there at that store, and then 50% that was already part of our team that we just merged together. But everything you said, I can agree with, is one, identifying somebody that's bringing the, your company culture in, but then also readily identifying what they already are doing and not just completely overrunning it. One of the things that I was thinking about while you're talking, the one book that I had read that prepared me for this unintentionally was The Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger. He's the CEO of Disney, and he talked. I had for whatever reason found that book prior to the acquisition in Anderson, and I was listening to it, and a majority of that book is talking about acquisitions and merging companies together and the conversations that led up to the acquisition and all those things. And so when I walked into the situation in Anderson, all of that was kind of playing in the back of my head, which was, one, make sure that you let everybody know that it's going to be okay and that their jobs are not in question. Let them know that you're not changing anything out of the gate. Let them know, go through and address all of the concerns that one would have when this situation happens. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, the reason you're moving into that market and the reason that you're acquiring that business is to take what's there and grow with it. You're not coming in there to replace everything. And also one of the reasons that we have interest in this business is because you are doing a lot of things really well.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And so those were all really big takeaways that I got from that book. And so when I went in to have those conversations, I just tried to address it out of the gate. Like, these are the things that we're trying to accomplish. And then the one mistake that I made is I positioned myself down there for the first week of operation. And I learned a lot of lessons from that. And I don't know that I would actually say that I wouldn't have done it again, but I definitely, on the next acquisition, I was prepared significantly different. But it was I guess a bit of a unique situation. One, we didn't have a transition team already established. So was
this the first one?
It was the first, large acquisition. We had done one other acquisition before, but there was no people, and we just kind of acquired customer base. And so I immediately was instituted as the guy, as the
source
boss.
of truth. Yeah, you're the boss.
And it was like 2 days in, and I was like, had this kind of come to Jesus moment, like, oh no, what's happening?
Did I just buy a job?
Oops. Because in Charlotte, we had been very strategic in putting people in charge and delegating and all this. And I stepped back 5 years and into the actual day-to-day operation. So it was very challenging, but I was able to quickly turn it around once I identified it and get people in place to be able to take that over. And then from that, it was, again, I would go down there, somewhat regularly to check in to see how things were going, because it was my first one. I didn't know exactly what to expect from the actual merging of those two operations. But then, as I was learning, as I was documenting, as we were actually being able to get some measurables, then we could fold those things back into what the larger operation would look like, and then also be better prepared for the next acquisition.
So you have another location too, right, Chet?
Yes, in Charleston.
And where is that?
It's part of the triangle.
Okay, the triangle, yeah.
And that one was an acquisition too?
Correct. Yeah, that was an acquisition.
So, dude, it seems like both of you're breaking into new markets has all been through acquisition. Is that intentional or accidental?
Well, we tried to do greenfield as our first expansion into a different market, and I repositioned 2 technicians down there, and we had very little success. So that's when the acquisition came up. So that was kind of what I was referring to earlier, is I actually have, from what I learned, I would go and do greenfield again.
So what did you learn?
Specifically, number one is I would lead in with a salesperson first and not a technician.
Okay.
My concept was to have a technician there to be readily able to do the work and that the work would come, but we didn't have anybody selling. So therefore nobody knew we were there, which was a bit of a challenge. What is happening?
Do you hear that?
Yeah. It sounds like construction or something.
Is it me?
Yes. Something just happened with your audio tone. You're completely different. Did you?
Is it better now?
Setting, like your volume has gone way up, and it sounds like it's on your computer speakers or something.
Let's see.
Really?
No, it's still on his Shure microphone.
Is it?
But I heard it sounded like there's some construction.
Well, I could hear it in my
now.
ears, but I couldn't tell it was me.
Okay,
I think it is construction. I think they're working on our building and it's coming through the vents and picking it up.
Okay, let's pause for 10 seconds for station identification. Okay, we're back.
All right. So what I was trying to get to I want to expand into new territories. I think some of our listeners probably want to do that. What is your recommendation? What are the pros and cons of both? What?
So I would, first of all, probably, shout out to a previous episode. We have talked about inorganic versus organic growth. Mm-hmm. I personally, if I was going geographically, I would absolutely go the route of acquisition. I just think it makes all the sense in the world. It's going to cost you more, but in the long run, I don't think it does. I'm going to say we half-assed try to start in a small suburb, again, like 10 or 15 minutes away, and just kind of door knock and throw some conversations out to some local businesses, but it just didn't really work. I'm a big fan of acquisition. Leverage the bank's money to, just to figure out what you can cash flow, make sure the deal makes sense on paper. And I'd take that direction because I think our first one was just a local company. I think I missed the mark on a few things, specifically kind of went in there and said, okay, what you're doing is dumb. What we're doing is great. And so now we're in charge, beat it, kind of thing.
Can't
Shockingly,
imagine why that went over well.
I might have phrased it a little differently, but
probably not much.
And then the second and the third were just smaller shops, so that worked out pretty well. But the Edmonton one, we've had our bumps, but for the most part, it's been way better. So acquisition, I definitely say is the way to go. How would I target that? That's the best channel to utilize, honestly, is our distribution channel and our manufacturing channel. Yeah. So our Assa Abloy reps, our distributors, they won't disclose exactly, like, obviously they're buying and any of that. Like, who do you think might be willing to have this conversation? Because our distributors know, they know a lot of details about our businesses. So just having that conversation and letting them know that you're in acquisition mode. Is there anyone that you think I should go have a talk to? And would you mind introducing me?
Yeah. Or markets that are ripe for support. Like that's another huge conversation right there is leveraging conversations with your manufacturer reps and saying, what areas are you guys going to that doesn't have good representation that would be beneficial to have a post up is going to be huge. Now, going back to, we tried to start this greenfield in Greenville, South Carolina. And I had 2 technicians down there for almost 16 months.
Oof.
So you've got salary, benefits.
So this is probably $100,000 experiment.
Yeah. And so to Lars' point, I would do it again. Now knowing what I know, I would just invest that money into a salesperson over a 12-month period to build demand.
Yeah.
Would you do it again over acquisition? So say, I don't know exactly where you want to expand to next, but say you wanted to expand to Atlanta. Would you look for acquisition or would you look for greenfield?
It's hilarious. So if I were going to expand into an additional market currently that there was not an acquisition available, then I would have a strategy. I have a strategy for that.
Okay.
I think the concept would be, if there is a possible acquisition, you start to look at those, because you're bringing in additional resources, you're bringing in additional knowledge. There's a lot of benefit, customer base, et cetera. But if you're going somewhere and an acquisition is not available, I think that you just have to develop a different strategy, in which case that you can deploy it. I think it can be successfully done. It's just understanding what actions you would want to take first. And again, that's where I was going back to, is I would start with sales and know that you have about a 12 month. So
your strategy is more, what market do I want to break into? And then,
correct.
And then you're saying, okay, is acquisition available? If not, okay, then I'll go greenfield.
Yeah. And in our, to the conversation earlier, we actually have a target list of all of the markets that we want to break into. And I show it to people all the time and say, this is where I want to go.
Yeah.
Like, if you know of an acquisition that's coming there, or if you know of, if there's anything I'm missing, like, let me know, because this is where I want to go.
I don't want to get the answer, well, it depends on a bunch of factors, but when you're identifying those markets, I assume population is something that you're looking at, or is it ease of service?
Yeah.
Or is it comparable to your kind of culture of Charlotte, or what are you looking at there?
I honestly looked at the map and saw the large.
To start.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go.
Identified.
Where do you have this map, actually? But anyway,
identified on the map, within 2 to 2.5 hours of each location. And then what is the major city, or what is a good location that would need to be serviced? And
why 2.5 hours?
So I thought it was like a reasonable amount of time to be able to resource, as you were expanding, to be able to resource your teams.
So you have no major cities within 3 hours of your.
Do what?
I'm not thinking. I was saying, what if you have no major cities within 4 hours of your city?
Oh, well, I mean, I would imagine in whatever. Yeah.
You don't either.
Just move. I don't. I guess you would have to expand that based off of your geographic location. I'd
gotta be close enough. I personally can drive to. That was my take.
I would imagine each geographic area is going to have some mindset of what a reasonable travel time is. Right. I mean, for me, it's like 12 minutes, but you should. So that was kind of what it pared down to be, was that 2.5 hours, so that we could continue to support each other when projects come up, and that still happens to this day.
When is it smart to break into a new market? Why would I want to? Why would I want to break into a new market versus just continue to saturate my existing market?
Referencing back to the other podcast that we had about organic versus acquisition, my theory was, I spoke to a lot of people around the actual size of our current market that we are in within Charlotte. What is the actual market share that's out there? How many millions of dollars is being spent in the lock and security industry, of which how much do we have of that already, and how much do we believe that we could continue to gain? And when I looked at that and started to do the math, we can debate how accurate the math is, but it's close enough to know that it wasn't going to complete the exact amount that I would like to gain for our entire portfolio. And so the only way to get more of that and to grow that entire portfolio, I had to start looking at other markets that I could get a piece of those as well and centralize the operation.
Was there a reason? Did you actively decide to go geographically rather than more service? You decide, in your traditional locksmith company, do I get into access control? Do I get into cameras? Do I get into automated entrances?
Yeah, so we were already strong in the commercial. So this is a very good question. We were historically did traditional locksmith work, and then we added on access control and cameras. There is a segment for sliders, for open, for operators. That is saturated with a couple of large companies, conglomerates. And we didn't do anything in the residential market. So we had really, we started cutting out all of the things that were distractions, and we focused solely on the commercial property management and community association management. That's where we were hardcore. And so at that point, now you've crafted out your customer base. So sure, you could kind of create a different business model to go after residential, but then is it as profitable as your commercial side? And then are you just settling to stay within that market where
just staying within kind of your specialization? And that,
correct.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Going back to, I don't know where the term greenfield came from, but just, starting up a company versus acquisition. One of the things that would be crucial if you are looking at getting into the acquisition game, your systems have to be ready for that. One of the biggest, I'm going to say, inhibitor to growth in our industry is the fragmented data and services. We got Outlook for email. We've got, we use Excel docs for this. We've got, ESC or Field Edge does this. And then our customer, our sales funnels, Pipedrive. And then we use cloud services, Dropbox for this. And there's just so much data and crap all over the place. And when you move into an acquisition, you're now inheriting their crap too. And it is not going to be, it's not going to be good. I'll tell you that. If you're acquiring another business, especially if it's one of those legacy businesses that people are looking to retire, how much do you think they're investing in automation and AI tools, right? So understanding and making sure you have a technical, and I don't mean locksmith technical, I mean technology plan for how to onboard them and be prepared that this is a whole new ball of wax for them as well, because that's going to be a huge inhibitor. And in a lot of situations, it is cost prohibitive to acquire a business if you're going from paper and pen, which a lot are. It's hugely, just the high security files is all I'm going to say. Just think about that. It's a huge investment. So you have to be prepared for that. Plan that out ahead of time. How are we going to do it? Talk to your IT provider or whoever does that on your side and go with a plan. In fact, they were even something as simple as phones. How are we going to manage the phone system, failovers, any of that kind of stuff. So that would actually be one of the first people I would involve in the acquisition is once we've decided, this is a target, bring them in, let's have a look and say, what is this really going to take to get this thing rolling?
And obviously this isn't a specifically acquisition episode, but that was one thing that I found shocking whenever we started going down this path is I spoke to a lot of other companies that had done multiple acquisitions before and asked them, hey, do you have a written plan, a strategy? How do you go in and do this? And everybody's like, we just wing it and figure it out. Oh my gosh. So that was one thing that we had to develop internally was here are all the systems, all the processes. This is the things that need to be checked off when we go in and do this acquisition.
Yeah. That's an eye opener. And obviously the flip side of that is if you do go into a new market and just, want to start something up, well, you do have all those things in place.
Correct.
But you're then going to spend all the time acquiring customers. And that's where I'm not sure I agree necessarily, but I can certainly understand where Chad's coming from like a sales perspective.
Sure.
Starting there.
Yeah, we haven't broken into any new markets, but my initial plan has been to try greenfield with like a salesperson, like Chad mentioned, because I want to have it be very streamlined and efficient. Like you said, when you're going in and acquiring something, a lot of times you're getting customers you may not want. You're getting people that maybe don't fit your culture. To me, there's a value, and I think of how Alan Ponte runs his business of like taking that model of very streamlined, very specialized. You do a couple of core things,
machine,
and you do it very well, and just taking that and going and starting it from scratch and just focusing very heavily on a few things and doing it really well.
We have the platform, and we sell the platform, and then if you don't like the platform, we don't sell you the platform.
But the machine. It's interesting hearing
that was
what
my Al impression. Impersonation. He'd love that.
Yeah, I'm sure he would.
Yeah.
It's interesting hearing what you said though about you tried that and it didn't really work very well, and obviously you learned some things from it. But
So one thing that I would throw out there, because we added an end user sales rep now about 15 months ago. And if you're going to go greenfield and you're going to put a salesperson in place, and this is one validated based off of my experience, but it's been information that was shared with me midway through the process, is allow 12 months before you're going to see any results. So understand, and that's to go back to what Lars was saying. My theory around it is, what is the cost of the acquisition, or what is the cost of putting a qualified salesperson for 12 months with no return, and probably having to implement a technician maybe 6 to 8 months in with very little return. So what is that investment versus the acquisition, which is going to be greater, which is going to get the faster return, and then you can start to make your decisions.
The number I use is $100,000. It's a $100,000 experiment. That's basically what it's come down to. And I mean, this isn't specifically about talking about new channels, and that, I think we can at some point talk about multifamily, and that's, kind of the latest buzz. All the data is talking about urbanization and people moving into multifamily environments, right? Apartment buildings is what I'm talking about. I think that's a whole other conversation, and how we as a security industry can service that. I know we tried to have that conversation a couple of days ago, or a few days ago, with some industry peers. And I think there was a resounding answer that came out of that.
You didn't show up.
The resounding answer was, we're not sure.
So you're talking about breaking into a new vertical market channel,
that's the one thing I will say, that is a great idea. It takes some implementation. If you are moving into most, I'm going to say, larger growth-oriented companies in our industry will generally be commercial focused. An untapped resource that we haven't done really well tapping, that sounded a little redundant, but is, you look at your customer base in home. So I'm going to say Charlotte. You look at your customer base, you look at the large property managers. Sure. How many of those property managers exist in Anderson? How many of them, hey, do you work with anyone out of Anderson at, Oxford Properties? Hey, do you know anyone down there? Yeah, because I would love, would you introduce me? Because, we're moving into that market. And a lot of people just be like, oh yeah, I work with Ted down in Anderson. And of course down there he'd be Ted. Ted and Anderson.
That specifically that, and talking to other vendors that you work in association with. So we work with some pool management companies on the homeowners association side. We don't work directly for them, but we work in conjunction with them a lot of times. And so what markets are they going into?
Right.
Great, because then you have a shared community, and you learn a lot from that as well. It's just a matter of it's networking, right? Yeah. It's at the basis of it. It's manufacturing. Your manufacturers that you're working with, your other cross vendors, and then your customer base. What are markets that are underserved, and do we have connection there that we can communicate with?
Yeah, one of the things I talk about all the time with various entrepreneurs and people that are looking to get into the game and do something new. I'm of a bootstrap mindset, which I basically says don't spend $1 before you've made $1, right? So when I'm getting into a new market, if I was going to go greenfield, I would have these conversations, and I would know that this is going to be a customer, and I'm going to have sales there before I've spent $1 to go there.
Sure.
And it's just the way I've gone. It de-risks a little bit. And, for the most part, it's been pretty successful. Knowing the answer before you ask the question is kind of the mantra of it. But, that would be to wildly throw $100,000 in the ocean and hope you catch a big fish is, probably not the best way to do it.
Right. Seems risky.
Yeah, it does sound risky.
Sounds like something you do.
Well, I can tell you from my experience.
Well, you said you're not risk averse. You said you like risky things.
Ouch, Tony, who hurt you, child?
Culture index is literally called a daredevil.
I would say from my experience, it doesn't continue to get you the return exactly in the period of time that you would be looking for. So have a little better strategy there, which would be measurables and achievables, all those things, which are things that I learned the hard way because I just said, go there. Sure, you'll meet some people and they'll want us to do work because
it's a $300,000 lesson. Thanks, Chad.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. We need some takeaways here. Give me some key takeaways. Tone, you know what's coming up after that too.
My biggest...
my takeaway is that I am now feeling sad about the amount of money that I invested in that poor Greenfield startup that I'd forgotten about, and now it's been brought back to my memory.
Happy to help with that.
Yeah, I love a good takeaway when it involves that Chad screwed something up and then has to relive it. So that that's a highlight for me.
Yeah.
But Tone, do you have any takeaways here for us?
My biggest takeaway is that if I think combining the two strategies is the best case scenario. I think when we try to expand into a new market, I'm going to look for a smaller company to acquire and use that to get our roots planted, and then potentially acquire larger companies once we get there. I think if we were trying to acquire a 30-person company 3 hours away, that'd be a nightmare. I think if we're going in greenfield, we'd lose a bunch of money like Chad did. I think the optimal way is to find someone small, find someone that has an established customer base that's not going to be too big of a lift to acquire, and kind of combine the best of both worlds and be intentional about what market we want to go into.
Yeah, my takeaway was what I just said, but I'm going to reach out to some of our customers, see who's in the Edmonton market and the Calgary market, and just say, hey, is there anyone there you want to introduce us to? I know I've already said that. I don't know who gave me the idea. I'm going to take credit for it, but that's a takeaway. And I think, that it doesn't even necessarily have to be geographically. If you are a traditional locksmith company, you're probably working with a lot of integration companies. You're working with commercial property managers, you're working with those. They probably have colleagues. Is there anyone else that you could introduce me to? That's a pretty simple conversation to have. So that's a good takeaway for me.
And the manufacturers that you work with, what are the underserved markets that you are
distributors as well
needing assistance with? And because that is a faster path in. Well, awesome. Tony, you're going to be ready for the topic for our next episode.
We need a drum roll here.
Yes.
A few seconds.
Podcast.
We appreciate all of the feedback that people have given us so far. And man, we're into 24 episodes now, which is double the amount that we originally got Tony to agree to. So that's impressive. And closing in on 6 months into the podcasting world.
Wow.
What a world this has been.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah. So thank you very much for all the support and the feedback that you've given us so far. You can find out all the information about the podcast, who we are, and access the videos and all the things at our website, unlockedpodcast.com. Unlockedpodcast.com.
Wow. Why is that so hard?
I don't know. It's been a long couple of hours with you guys. Tony, what's the next topic that we're going to be discussing on the upcoming episodes?
Private equity and the role it plays in the security industry.
Whoa.
Good Lord. Tony, going for the fences.
Yeah.
Chad, I know we're all going to be doing a little bit of road shows here coming up. Do you want to, I know we've got pretty extensive calendars over the next bit. We're going to be in Roanoke, Virginia. We're going to be in Charlotte. We're going to be in Vegas.
All doing live shows. So if you want to come and
we're going to be in
us.
Oregon. We're going to be all over the place. But do you maybe, what would you recommend if we're making these shows and there's anybody in the area that wants to reach out or wants to come say hi? What's our calendar look like here?
I have no idea what the calendar is going to look like,
but I would say
calendar is irrelevant. But for sure, Charlotte, Roanoke, that's ISC West, Vegas, and
Charlotte, Roanoke. Roanoke's for the MSE 2X something or other.
Advisory board meeting and then new owners onboarding.
And, Tone, do you remember when that is?
Second or third week in April.
God, it's seriously, just one of us. If one of us could be just competent, that would be perfect. But okay, so we're up there. And then we're going to ISC West. That is
April 3rd first part of April 4th. Second, third, and fourth.
Second, third, and fourth. those days in Las Vegas. So if you are around or you're traveling to any of those shows, pop by and say hello. Yep. We might be fighting like brothers and sisters by that time after 3 straight days together. So maybe see us earlier in the week. But
we should get matching T-shirts or something like that. To wear.
I'm with Dummy.
Wouldn't that be cool?
With arrows pointing each direction.
All right, Tony, you're responsible for that.
Nope.
Okay.